monetary policy is changes in the money supply and interest rates. Right? More money and lower interest rates will shift aggregate demand to the right. And yeah, we're confusing there. Number 2 is fiscal policy. Fiscal policy means changes in government spending and taxes. We have a whole chapter on each one of these things before this class is done, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time here on them now. More spending and lower taxes shifts aggregate demand to the right. 3, expectations. Again, we improve consumer or business expectations, and we're going to shift aggregate demand to the right. Just talked about that. And then international, as we get more exports, fewer imports, will shift aggregate demand to the right. Okay. So this is what that all looks like. So I have AD and AD2. And AD2 is an increase over AD, right? Because at the price level of 100, I have 20 trillion in GDP, real GDP at AD2, and 10 trillion at AD. Again, what can get us from AD to AD2? Well, more consumer spending, an increase in consumption, an increase in investment, an increase in government spending, a decrease in taxes on consumers, less savings, more exports, fewer imports, more money. Those things can get us from AD to AD2, and the opposite of that would get us from AD2 back to AD. All right, so we had this great recession back 2007, 8, 9. Why? What happened? Well, aggregate demand had to go down for us to get there, right? We went from AD to AD2, different AD to AD2. Aggregate demand would have gone down. Why did aggregate demand go down? Well, simple part of this, and we'll explain a lot more of this as we go through the last few chapters. But simple part of this is the price of houses crashes. So A, we're not going to build as many new houses. That's a decrease in investment. That's going to lower AD. 2, consumers who bought houses they really couldn't afford, hoping to flip them and make money off them and move on, are now stuck with this house that they can't afford, and they're going bankrupt, in foreclosure, all this other stuff. Their spending is going down. So we have a decrease in consumer spending and a decrease in investment, and those two things are going to make aggregate demand shifts to the left and causeth the recession. So we can look at these. I have graphs of a lot of this stuff because I know how excited you are by graphs. You're ready to be an econ major now, and that means you live to graph. Okay? So if we look at the recession, the alleged recession in 2001, consumption just goes for about 5 minutes and then goes back up again. If we look at the recession 2008, 9, 10, you notice that well into the recession, consumer spending stays high, but eventually in the recession, consumer spending hits a wall kind of, and it drops a lot, but then it heads back up. And you notice it's kind of a straight line. If we take out the little bump there in 2008, 2009, consumer spending is kind of a straight line. And those two lines are kind of parallel, right? The first part of this graph is Bush as president, the second part is Obama, and the third part is Trump. And there's no difference, right? If you get rid of the recession parts, that line's the same line. Okay? The thingy right there at the end's not the same, though. The coronavirus thingy there at the end. Looks a little different, right? Consumer spending went from 15 trillion to 12 trillion in like 2 months. So this is what's called GPDI, gross private domestic investment. This is the I. And you can see that there was a much bigger change in domestic investment, that investment fell almost in half in that little recession in 2001. Then you can see investment in 2007, 8, 9, and you can see it goes from it's already falling before the recession starts. You notice that? Investment's already on the way down a little bit before the recession starts. But the start of the recession, it's at 2,600, and at the end of the recession, it's at 1,800. So we lost, right? We lost close to a third of investment, total investment. They don't really scale these graphs right in some sense because they're confusing. But we lost nearly a third of all investment in the United States for that year and a half. And then you notice it pops back up, takes a little right around the time of the election, which often happens. It kind of levels out right before the election, which it did, you notice, back in the Bush, end of Bush's term while that election's going on, investment kind of flattened out a little bit too. So investment, and then it starts going back up. But again, look at the upward part of the Bush line, look at the upward part of the Obama line, and then look at the upward part of the Trump line. So this is Bush, that's Obama, that's Trump. The slopes of those lines are indistinguishable, right? Investment, the last three presidents, investment, taking out the recession parts, investment has grown at the same rate for Bush and for Obama and for Trump, right? Okay, fine. Here's government. Government, you notice that during the recessions, government goes up, all right? Here's a graph that's different, though. So here's government while Bush is president, just goes up. Here's government after the recession's over while Obama's president. Doesn't go up. And then it starts to go up again toward the end of his term. But look at this. So between 2010 and 2014, government spending doesn't increase at all. It just kind of stays. And then it starts to go up again, and then it goes up even faster since Trump's been president. But that is about the same as that, right? The weird thing here, the unusual thing, is that the increase in government spending when Obama was president is much smaller than the increase in government spending with the person who came before him and the person who came after him. And then here's our trade balance. Higher is better. So trade balance is good here during the recession. It's pretty small. And then during the good times, we get a big increase in the trade balance. And then it kind of flattens out before the recession. And then the trade balance improves dramatically during the recession. And then it gets worse. And then it kind of flops around. And then it gets worse again. And the last few months, it's been getting a little better. Okay, fun? Yeah. All right. Aggregate supply. So aggregate supply is relationship to the price level and the quantity of real GDP supplied. That's really kind of meaningless. And, well, it's important to understand that in this world, right, the real and the nominal are separate. So changes in prices don't affect the number of workers that are in the system. They don't affect the size of the capital stock, and they don't affect technology, right? So we don't go, hey, prices are going up, I should invent something. The size of our labor force, the size of our capital stock, and the size of technology, at least in the long run, are not really that affected by the prices of things. That's what this part says. So this is a different world than regular supply and a different world than what affects aggregate demand. Those prices might affect how many workers are willing to work or what the capital stock is in the short run, but just not in the long run. You're like, yeah, you're right. Ooh. Okay, so we're drawing this line, which is long run aggregate supply. And it's straight up and down. Why? Well, the classical dichotomy says that real and nominal don't affect each other. That real matters, nominal doesn't. So the real part of this is real GDP, okay? And that's determined by supply. So supply determines the real. What's demand going to do? Yeah, demand is going to determine the nominal. So let's add some stuff here. That line, where is LRAS? Well, LRAS is a potential real GDP, and we talked about potential GDP. Chapter 8, I think, was potential GDP. That's the most we can reasonably expect to produce. So this LRAS is where our maximum production is. It's potential real GDP. If you're Uncle Milty, you say it's natural real GDP. Okay? It's where the economy should be. And if we're there, we're at the natural rate of unemployment, the rate of unemployment that naturally occurs in the system. They're all going to be, all those words have something to do with that long run LRS being that nice straight up and down line at a particular spot. Okay? So we'll be back to this in a minute. What happens if we're at the red dot? Instead of being on the red line where we want to be, we're at the red dot. What's the red dot mean? Well, it means we're producing less than we can, right? Our actual production is right here. This is where we are. We're capable of being here, but we're only here, okay? So we have potential real GDP, where we could be is the red line, but the red dot's below that. If we're at the red dot, we say we have a gap. There's a gap between actual GDP and potential real GDP. And a lot of times people would say this is a recessionary gap, not necessarily a recession, so we add the airy. So it's recessionary gap. It's a gap that feels like a recession. If it isn't, it feels like one. Okay? So at that red dot, if we're at that red dot, we're going to have unemployment. Okay? And not just regular old employment. People are going to be unemployed, not by choice. They're going to wish they had jobs and can't get them. All right? So there's be unemployment, and there could possibly be a recession there. Okay? Possibly. Maybe not, but possibly. Is that good? So what should workers do? If you're here, what should workers do? Well, the answer is, in this world at least, if you can't find a job at whatever wage it is that you were working, you say, hey, I'm willing to take a lower wage. And you keep looking for your jobs at a lower and lower and lower wage until you finally find one. Okay? So maybe you're a rich person. My sister, who was on Wall Street, leaves that job, decides to move to Hawaii, starts out in Hawaii looking for executive jobs. As that job search goes on and she can't find that job that she really wants, she eventually takes just a real basic commission, not going to make a lot of money job, and then figures out a way to work herself back up. But you take, right? If you can't find a job at the wage you want, eventually you're going to start taking jobs that pay less than that, right? You get fired from your executive position. You try to find another executive position. And my sister did not get fired. Let's be clear about that. And I loved my sister. So this is a different person. If you're a person who gets laid off, you're a casino executive and you get laid off, first you look for a casino executive job, and then maybe you look for a lower level job in a casino, and then you look to see if there's a job to be a restaurant manager, and then you end up as a manager at Target or barista at Starbucks because you have to accept lower wages sometimes. Okay? All right. So some what if stuff. Don't forget that wages are a price in this. And we expect that wages and prices are going to move together. So if your wages go up If prices are going up, wages will keep up. If prices are going down, wages are going to have to go down. Okay? And we expect kind of the ratio of wages to prices to stay constant. That's the real wage. Your wage without thinking about prices. What you can buy over time. So if you stay in your job, no matter what happens to prices, what you should be able to buy over time should stay constant. So your lifestyle, your purchasing power should stay constant, even if prices are going up and down. Okay? But what if they don't? What?